Welcome to Getting Rich Together, the show for successful women who are looking to take their financial futures to the next level. I'm your host, Shama Bunton. When I started my wealth building journey, nobody knocked on my door to give me all the answers. So I want to talk to the experts who've done it and bring the answers to you so we can discover the right opportunities that will help us achieve the financial futures we've always dreamed of together and have fun doing it. So let's dive into this episode and start getting rich together. I am here today with the incredible Jen White. Jen, most people know you from having your firm, Drawing from Memory, now over 20 years, which is so incredibly impressive and exciting. And they know you about being able to deliver and drive home messages, branding, and really birth ideas and put things into the world that are new and fresh and that have a lot of deep perspective. And what I love about who you are is you're not only an incredible entrepreneur, but you've had your hands in all sorts of interesting things that we're going to get a chance to dive into today. So thank you for being here with me, and thank you for being open and willing to spill the tea.
Of course. It's my pleasure. Thank you so much for having me.
Absolutely. So Jen, let's start from the beginning. Before you had your big entrepreneurial business and started building and working on brands, you were once a little girl and you were once in diapers, but we're not going to go back all the way that far, but certainly to a time that's like 7, 9, 10 years old. Where were you in the world? What was life like for you? And most importantly, what was money like around you? What were those early stories?
Yeah. Well, I come from a very traditional New England family, which means talking about money is never something that we do. Even to this day, I cannot get anybody in my family to talk about money. But I was actually, when I was 7, living in Vermont. I lived in a really pretty rural part of Vermont. We lived on a back road. I like to tell people that, I really walked a half mile to school every day just to get the bus and spent a lot of time by myself outside in the woods. I had a big imagination. So when I was outside in the woods, I was never really alone because there was all sorts of imaginary friends and fairies and things around me, including probably my little dog that would just go with me everywhere. But we didn't have a ton of money at all, actually. My mom really at that point she wasn't creative, so she was always trying to piece something together. But I remember at that point in time, I think she worked at a nursery, like a plant nursery, a couple days a week. And then my stepfather was a high school teacher at one of the local high schools. They had just built our house. It was a very, very modest little house down this dirt road. And I don't even really think I had a bedroom. I had places like nooks within the house that were mine, but I didn't have, like a traditional room that was like, had my decorations and everything on it. I think we had a sunroom and I had a loft in the sunroom. And so that's kind of where I slept. And I do remember pretty vividly desperately wanting to take ballet classes. And we didn't have a ton of extra. I remember my mom asking her grandmother if she would pay for them. And so that was how I got to go to ballet. And I loved it. I loved it. But, it's funny because even though we didn't really have money, my life was really full. It was, full because there was a lot of vibrancy in it within my mind, probably.
And what I think is so interesting is back when most of us were on the show, at least for growing up, it's like we were bored, There were moments, it wasn't a lot of stimulation, right? It was like often you're off in the park or you're playing in the house. But today children are so activated all the time. But when we were younger, it's like no matter if you were in a city or in the country, boredom was like a part of being a child. It's like we have to be creative and experience things. And I think it's also quite beautiful that when it comes to supporting things in the world, like, family at an early age is an extended family, and family can become such a big support system. And I think that's really beautiful modeling as a young girl. As you were growing up and finding your way through high school, what kind of teenager were you, Jen? Were you into getting part-time jobs and being really independent? Or were you heads down and studying sports? Like, what was life like for you as you were starting to assert your identity?
I would say I was definitely very independent. So growing up in rural Vermont means that not every town actually has a high school. And they still do this today. If your town doesn't have a high school, they will tuition you out to anywhere you want to go. And so that was presented to me when I was in 8th grade. And they were like, anywhere you want to go. And my mom had gone to boarding school in another rural part of Vermont, and she lived in a teepee. And so I just had these like images of my mom living in a teepee at boarding school with her guitar.
How fabulous.
Like what a fabulous image. I know. I was like, maybe that could be me. And I remember my mom, one of her really good friends, also went to boarding school in Vermont. And we went down to see this boarding school and go to like a harvest festival one year. And I just was like, oh yeah, this is me. Like, when can I go here? I remember coming home from that presentation at school and saying, Mom, they're going to pay for me to go to boarding school. Like, I should go. And she was kind of like, I don't know about that. Anyway, I went to the library. At that point, we lived in town. We had moved from the country into town. And so I walked myself over to the library. And I had been friends with the librarians for a long time because we lived so close to the library and I had nothing to do. So I would just go over and hang out with the librarians. So I went over there and asked them, I was like, so how do you go to boarding school? And this is obviously before the internet. You couldn't ask Google. And they actually had a little booklet of boarding schools. And so I brought it home and I was like, oh, look, Mom, here are all the boarding schools. And we wrote to the different boarding schools that looked interesting in the catalog, and they sent us back a VHS tape.
Oh my God, that's amazing.
Mm-hmm. Yep. And so we got a VHS tape back and we looked at all of them, and I decided on maybe 2 that I liked. And they didn't happen to be the ones that I thought I would like, And so the one that I ended up applying to and getting into was in Western Massachusetts. So about 20 minutes or so from the border of Vermont. So close, but not in Vermont. And I applied and I got in, and it was very exciting. And then we had the talk with the financial aid officer, and they were like, here's how much it costs. And the town did not pay the full tuition. And so we got a lot of financial aid, and every year I would have to write to the financial aid office, please, can I have more money? I can't come if I don't have more money. So it was very
difficult,
self-driven and difficult. But that said, once I got to boarding school, my mom dropped me off, and I remember meeting my new roommate that I'd never met before. We both looked at each other. We just were like, yes,
freedom.
We are free. Goodbye, mothers.
Oh my God. And boarding school also attracts a certain kind of individual, right?
Yeah.
Typically, from my experiences, not being at boarding school, but having friends who had gone, it seems like it attracts sort of a high net worth caliber of families that are putting their kids through these schools. How was your experience? Was your boarding school similar, different? Were there moments of sort of reconciling yourself with your peers?
Yeah, it was definitely a little different when Parents Weekend came around, and, a lot of parents would pull up in fancy foreign cars, and, the Toyota Corolla would come and pick me up. That always felt a little odd. But luckily, I went to boarding school in the era of grunge. And so everyone shopped at the thrift store. and wore things that looked like they came out of the trash can. That
So
really
not the
didn't
Chanel
matter.
handbags and not this very logo label driven environment. Wonderful.
No, it was all good. And in fact, the culture was very much like, let's share. And I don't know if this was unique to the boarding school I went to. It sort of had that, that hippie vibe. So it may have been part of the culture, but it was really, we had these communal closets. I remember this one pair of pants that basically like went onto every single body in my dorm room, in my whole dorm. It was like,
It's like the movie, The Traveling Sister Pants, or whatever the movie is. I don't remember.
Yeah, you'd have to reserve it. You're like, on the first Monday of the month, I get the pants. Then they'll go to you, and then they'll go to you. So,
oh my God, I love this.
I fit in, no problem, but didn't feel weird at all. I think when the outside came in, because, so insular, like everybody was there, everybody was on the same page. But then when the outside came in, when the parents came in, or when you went to somebody's house over summer break, you were like, oh, I get it.
Amazing.
But it was eye-opening too. It was because coming from a really small town in Vermont, I didn't have perspective. I didn't know what professionalism looked like. I didn't know what was really possible. And so I think seeing success in context was helpful at a young age.
That's beautiful. And as you found yourself wrapping up high school and then deciding to now further apply and insert yourself into the world, you're already obviously with boarding school very independent. So most of the time people go to college and it's their first moment of being independent. But you had a few years under your belt. How did you decide where you were going to go to university, what you were going to study, and how clear were you at that time that you would end up down the path that you're on today?
I think that's one thing about me that I always say I have really clear 20/20 vision. And I think that I've had a very strong vision since day one. I knew I wanted to be successful. I knew I needed to make certain choices to be able to do that. And I did. I was like, when I saw other kids in my school getting pregnant and dropping out of school before I went to boarding school, I said, I'm not doing that. I'm going to go to boarding school because I need to get a good education. I was always very into the arts. I mean, that's what I was brought up on, was creativity. And I knew that I wanted to do something in the art. I wanted to go to, if I was going to do it, I needed to go to the best art school. And in my kind of later years in high school, I just really started focusing on building a great portfolio and taking all of the art classes that I possibly could. And luckily, my boarding school had an amazing art program. So I applied early admission to RISD and got in, and there was no turning back. I was just like, dropped that calculus class like a hot bomb. Was like, sign me up. I'm going to be an artist.
That's amazing. And RISD is such an incredible university. And so at that time, when it came to thinking about funding your education or how you were going to manage the university tuition and university life, was it, okay, I'm going to get a part-time job and figure out how to balance the demands of my education plus also the financial demands? How did you start to think about making it all work together?
Yeah, my situation was a little unique because I grew up with my mom and I don't want to say impoverished, but like there were years when we were on food stamps. Like it was not great. My father, my biological father, who was somewhat estranged, had some money. I didn't see him all the time. Maybe I saw him 1 week out of the year. And so he was not in my life and he didn't provide for me at all. And so when I was getting ready to go to college, my mom saw, wow, this was a big struggle to get through boarding school. I think we need to have him pay somehow for college. So she sued him. And he had to pay for college legally. So he did, which was probably the biggest gift that I could have ever received. I didn't have any like spending money or anything like that. So I actually did always work when I was in college. But started out just as like work study in the fundraising office, which is funny because now I volunteer in the fundraising office. But as my career progressed in college, I always worked at restaurants. And for me, it was the perfect balance because I would get out of class, go work at a restaurant. And then by the time the party was started, I was done working and had $100 in my pocket and would be able to go to the party too. So it was really a balance of how can I be responsible? How can I get all my work done? And how can I still be social? Because that's
You made it work.
not something I wanted to cut out.
Yeah, you made it work. It's really funny. I often would tell people like my first jobs out of college, I was first in the office, last out the door, and then I would go meet up with my friends on the dance floor at 10 p.m. at night and stay out till 1 a.m. and then be the first in the office the next day. It's a grind. I can't do that now.
That catches up with you. That's for sure.
But that was at a time you're like, I'm willing to do it all. And I don't want to sacrifice for that which I want. And so as you were getting ready to graduate, obviously designing for a career in the arts is, unfortunately, in our country, not something that is necessarily well supported. I feel like in places like Europe, artists and the industry itself is seen as part of the fabric of culture and society, where artists are a part of what shape our world. But in this country, it's really de-emphasized. And so as you were starting to figure out, coming out of university, how you were going to launch yourself and what work was ultimately going to look like, what did you start to piece together? And how did you start to make sense of these early adult years of being on your own feet?
Yeah, I mean, I think it was definitely a puzzle to piece together because, as you say, when you graduate with a degree in fine art, it's not, you oftentimes can't go to monster.com or whatever the job posting site at the time was and see a career that matches all your skill set. It really doesn't exist. And it's something that I tell young alumni all the time, which is you're really going to have to make your career. It's not something that's going to be posted on some job board for you. So I had been lucky as I was graduating college. Computers were really starting to take off and the internet was something that we were all playing around with. So I just happened to take an HTML class my senior year and I liked it. It was fun. And so I graduated with a good practical skill set, even though it had only been one class. I knew how to make a website. And at the time, that wasn't a skill that anybody had. It was fairly rare. All my friends were moving to New York. They were all their parents were going to buy them an apartment or rent them an apartment in the city. And they were all going to hang out and have fun and look for internships. I couldn't afford to do that. So I moved home. I moved back to Burlington or actually it wasn't Burlington at the time, but I moved back to Vermont and I decided to piece it together. I thought, okay, well, I can definitely work in any of these restaurants and make a bit of money that I could use to do something interesting with. Or I could start making some websites. At the time, I thought, oh, I'll do that. And I decided I was going to charge $200 a page for a website. And I worked in a bar. And so anybody who would come in, I was a chatter. So I would just chat with them and they'd say, what do? You just graduated from art school. That's so cool. And I would say, yeah. And I think I want to start a business making websites. And I got some clients.
Yeah, how exciting.
I
mean, yeah. Yes.
For $200 a page. I remember going into having a meeting with one of my first clients and we had sketched out a sitemap and I started counting out the pages and I said, oh, that's $2,000. Oh my God. Okay, that's great. Is that okay? And the people were like, yeah, that's great. No problem. They were getting a deal.
Yeah.
And I was thinking, oh my God, $2,000.
That's a great win-win, right? It's like when both parties feel really amazing about it. It's like, what a validating feeling for both.
Yeah. Yeah. I think out of necessity, I just started doing that because there was no creative jobs in Vermont. I couldn't find anything that would work. I mean, I graduated with a degree in photography. I could photograph some weddings maybe and, make $50 an hour. I made more at the bar. And so I just was like, okay, I'll start my little business. And yeah, so my early career was just it was a lot of work and not as much fun as all my friends were having in New York City.
But also lucrative. And it sounds like you started to hit on something. And what I think is so interesting is when you start to realize, like, what does the market need from me, or where are things moving, and how do I adapt and change? And so as you started to build this body of work, talk to me about how your career and life evolved, and then, or your career life evolved, and then also your personal life evolves, right? And so when you're young and you're making great cash, you don't necessarily know about taxes. You don't necessarily know about it's a sole proprietorship versus an S corp or an LLC. So, like, when did you go from this is a cool little side thing I'm doing to I'm actually going to really put the structure and start to really build something out?
Yeah. So I have a funny story about my partner, my husband now. We met when we were very young. So we were actually campers at summer camp. And I had graduated from college and we were together. And we were like, what are we gonna do? Where are we gonna go? And I had built up my business enough just through word of mouth that I landed a client that I felt like it was a good client. They were going to pay me like $2,500 a month to just do creative stuff for them. It's funny. It was called Digital Photo Adventures.
I love that.
They wanted to make a whole business out of doing like digital photography and, just sharing the techniques with people around the world. So we were going to go on cruise ships and teach people about digital photography. And so he just thought, oh, great. This is like a young person who's tech savvy who just graduated with a degree in photography and can communicate the basics around photography and can build a website and do marketing. And so he was like,
Gold mine.
yeah, he was like and I was like, this is great. He's my client. This is my cornerstone client. He's going to pay me $2,500 a month. My husband and I were, or my boyfriend at the time, we were like, okay, I have this great client. Let's move somewhere fun. And so we decided that we were going to move to Boulder, Colorado. And I feel like that was really the start of my business. That was like, this is it. I'm not working in any other restaurants or bars or anything like that. I am moving to Colorado. I'm starting my business and I have this amazing client. And so, yeah, I had to figure out all of the business stuff that by the way, I still hate. I'm not good at. I don't like it. It's the necessary evil. And so, yeah, that was, I think, the real start. And by the way, I, of course, because I could make websites, made my own website and somehow stumbled upon being good at search engine optimization.
Beautiful.
When we moved to Colorado, I was like, oh, good. I'm going to put local keywords into my, title tags and whatnot. And immediately I was like, web designer, Boulder, graphic designer, Boulder, like some of these very specific local keywords. And I started getting clients.
It's amazing, Jen. And so obviously in the early stages of business, you're like making money. And then at a certain point, you need to scale. And then you start spending money on hiring people or scaling processes. And eventually you need a bookkeeper. And eventually like things get to sort of operationalize. And then it starts to hit another point where then you can start taking maybe some more money out of the business. And at what point were you able to take money out of the business and start to invest or save or do things that were adding to the security or foundation of your financial future? How did that start to build as your business was building?
Pretty early on, my husband and I, he was my boyfriend still at the time, we were in Colorado. We thought we really liked Colorado. And we were like, let's buy a house. We need to buy a house. And so I had this this was we had lived there for a year, and I had my cornerstone client for the year. And I was like, this is it. I'm doing great. I have this great career. Like, this is amazing. Let's buy a house.
And how old were you?
24.
Oh my God, amazing.
I was like a subprime. This is right before the subprime crash of 2008. We bought our house in 2003.
Oh my gosh.
I was a subprime borrower. I went to, we decided to buy this house and we brought $1,500 to close. They were like, oh yeah, you can roll the down payment right into the mortgage. And we were like, okay, let's do that. But then I did take some little bits of money out of the business and we renovated our house. We made it and it was a condo, by the way, not a house, because that's what you can afford in Boulder when you're 23. We renovated it and did our little things and lived there. And then we decided that actually my husband, he's a tiny bit younger than me. So he actually he went to school at CU and he graduated and got a job right out of school in Los Angeles. And so we did get married, and then he moved to Los Angeles. And a couple of years into owning the house, I moved to Los Angeles as well. And at the time, we couldn't sell the condo and make any money on it. We probably would have had to bring money to close. So we rented it, and we moved to California. Just that $1,500 turned into an amazing investment. We rented that for probably 15 years. And
wow.
Yeah, it was a fabulous $1,500 investment.
That's incredible, Jen.
Yeah.
And so help me understand how your financial life, let's say ebbed and flowed over time. I think what's so interesting is, money isn't static. We have money because we often need it for things, right?
Yep.
The whole point of it is to use it and for it to do something. And then obviously family and things start to come up where, you need money to do things and desires change and somehow things keep getting bigger. And it's like life has a way of happening to us to some degree. How has your sort of financial life changed over the course of running and managing this business? At what points outside of, let's say, this first condo that you guys closed on, what were some of the other key decisions or inflection points for you where you were like, okay, this becomes worth it for me to put money into? Obviously, not every investment's a winner. So how did you start to navigate, what that looked like? And also furthermore, when you have your own business, it's not like there's a 401k that people tell you to start. You have to figure out some of this stuff on your own. So at the same time as you're making investments, where did you get education from? How did you learn what to do?
I think I bought a lot of books on Amazon. I did a lot of reading about first of all, how to price my services, how to start an agency, how to do all of these things. I had no idea. I had never worked for anybody. And so I was flying blind. And I remember I remember reading one of these books and then seeing the author, one of the authors for this section on pricing for agencies. And I wrote to her and I was like, oh my God, I need your help. And she was like, okay. And so she ended up working with me for a little bit. She, in a way, she helped me with my pricing strategy and coached me a little bit. But one of the things she said to me is she was like, I would never recommend for anybody to do what you do because you had to figure it out all on your own. You had to figure out how to make this all happen. And I think that there was always a learning curve. Always I was trying to figure things out. And I think that reflected also in our personal finances too. It was we would do some reading and my husband and I would talk about what we do with the money. We would coach each other. How would we use this money? How would we put this to best use? And while we were living in Los Angeles, my husband decided to go back to grad school. And so we were again on one income. And again, we decided to buy a house. I think we knew that my business was healthy enough and we just said, okay, let's buy another house. And so that was a good inflection point for us because I think I had done enough research to understand what the market was really looking, where in the market we could buy and how much it could potentially increase given what we had to put in. And we didn't have hardly any money, right? Because we were one income. I was the sole proprietor, blah, 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 blah. So we bought in like the junkiest neighborhood we could find in Los Angeles that was close enough to his grad school that he could ride his bike because we only had one car. But we knew it would go up. We figured, okay,
bullet.
This is it. Let's just do it.
Yeah.
So that was an inflection point, knowing that we could do that. And then as we had student loans piling up, like realizing, okay, we need to be able to take any chunks of money and pay that off as soon as we can. Like we didn't want to have a lot of debt. But those decisions, I think, were all driven by having a goal. And I think because we had a goal of saying, okay, we know we want to make money on a house, and we know we don't want to be paying the 11% interest rate on loans. We made a sacrifice. We didn't live in the cool neighborhood, and we squirreled away as much cash as we possibly could and paid off those loans. So I think that having that sort of like overarching goal of realizing that if we want to do the things we want to do, we needed to have discipline, really, is what it came down to.
And it sounds like also just an incredible amount of teamwork and this ability to really be aligned together on what's important and how do we really maximize and leverage each other, right? And how do we achieve each other's dreams, right? And in terms of having the things we want or creating the things that we want in the world. And it's a really beautiful story of partnership and sort of teamwork when it comes to this. So clearly you don't live in LA anymore. So tell me about the decisions and that led you back to where you are today and what some of the bumps have been across the road. So obviously deciding to have a family and deciding, okay, it's almost like, again, it's like the MBA, but for 18 years when it comes to cost. So how did you start to think about together family planning and once again, relooking at resources and how you guys were investing in building wealth?
I mean, I don't think that anybody thinks that when they decide to have a family, they don't think about the cost, really. Like they don't think about the true cost. And it's just hitting me now. I have a 10 and a 12-year-old, and I'm like, oh my God, they're really, really expensive.
Oh, they eat a lot too. It's like all of a sudden food consumption really changes. You're like, wow.
And you want to give them all of their dreams. And I think especially because my husband and I grew up without having that, we want to just give it. So like my older son, he's going off to ski academy in a couple of weeks, and we're like, okay, we'll pay for that. And then they go to summer camp, and we'll pay for that. And they want bikes. It just doesn't stop. I think that had we been really calculated and really planned out everything, we probably would have thought twice about what that looked like, because we have to work really hard to make it all happen. But we wouldn't trade it for the world. They're two awesome, awesome, awesome people. I think that when we had our oldest son, Fox, he was born basically on the day of my husband's final exam from USC. And so we're pretty calculated about that, because we were like, okay, we have to have the kid right when you graduate, because then, you can take some time and be with the kid. I mean, when I look back at it, I don't think I'm that type A, but then I look at my life and I'm like, oh my God.
The story tells a different narrative.
Should I just have made a spreadsheet when I was 8 and like it would have been all good?
Less fun. More fun to find out at the end, right?
Yeah. But yeah, we had the 2 kids, and we always knew that we needed to move back east. Our whole family is back east. And I think it was very clear when we were buying $2,000 worth of plane tickets to come back to New England at Thanksgiving, and it was like gray and disgusting and no one wanted to be here, but yet we had to see our family. I think that kind of like ticket shock really drove the decision to to move back. But also, I think that having grandparents in your life is one of the most special things that, you can have. And we definitely just didn't want to take that away from our kids. We sold our house in LA and we bought it at the bottom of the market and sold it at the top. So we were really lucky and we were able to move to a beautiful town outside Boston and buy a gorgeous house and not have to have a $10,000 a month mortgage. Sometimes I think that while we were really calculated, we also just had a lot of luck.
I think it's beautiful to have a sense of humility about just how things have unfolded. So both of you guys, in terms of looking at the financial pie and the areas of building wealth, one of the things that was really exciting for me when we connected was really about just all the different ways in which we can build wealth. And so I'm curious, from an experimental side of things, from looking at the creativity around wealth building and finances, how have you guys really gone about sort of looking at maybe, let's say, non-traditional ways of making money, which I would consider to be have a job, work for someone else, or start your own company, right?
Yeah.
Like those are really the two ways that most of us are taught to build wealth. What are some things you guys have experimented with?
I mean, there's always ideas floating around. Like, I think that my husband and I, one of the things that connects us so much is that we feed off each other's kind of creativity and ideas. And he's an engineer, so he's very analytical, and I'm obviously a creative. And so those two personality types just work really well because I'll say, what about this? And then he'll be like, and yeah, that could work like this. I think that, and I never really described myself as an entrepreneur when I was younger. I just was like, oh yeah, I'm a workaholic. I just work. I like it. I was an entrepreneur and I am an entrepreneur. And I think that kind of rubbed off on my husband a little bit. And about 5 years ago, he decided to buy a business and bought a business that was like a small business, nothing, 2 or 3 employees, a little bit of revenue, but had some clients. And so he bought that business and was able to grow it and build it into something that he actually just sold. I think that has been front and center in a lot of our conversations recently. It's like, do we have to make everything? Maybe we don't have to make everything. Maybe we can leverage some of the assets that we have and buy some things and see what comes out. My husband just went to an entrepreneurship through acquisition conference, and one of the guys that he was talking to recently was a guy who buys vending machines and has actually made a decent business out of buying vending machines. And he just has a part-time guy who goes around, buys some chips at Costco and fills them up. And then I was like, oh my God, that would be a really good job for a teenager. Do you think we could get that job? Like, can we get that job for our kid? Like, how cool would that be to like have as a teenager in college or whatever, to be like, yeah, I've got like 6 vending machines and I go buy some snacks and I fill them up. And then that's my job in college. So
I love that.
I think I have a natural curiosity. And so I think where we're thinking about vehicles to make money is all coming from a sense of curiosity that both of us are kind of like, oh, that's interesting. That's how that person makes money. Oh, that's interesting. That's how that person makes money. And then processing it and thinking about it and seeing those opportunities maybe come to life sometimes.
That's really exciting. And so obviously having a 10 and 12-year-old means that not only are they picking up money stories from you, right? So they're growing up and seeing like, all right, this is how mom is an entrepreneur. This is how she is managing decisions or processes and how you guys operate as a parental unit and make decisions. Do you guys have conversations at home around money? Are they on allowances? How are you looking at educating today's young, brilliant minds on money? Because man, it is something that I know I was never talked to about when I was little. But yet the scarcity of it was all around me. And I feel like for myself and many of my friends today, our kids are growing up in a very different way than we did.
Yep.
So how are you reconciling those components and what might conversations look like?
I think I read a book early on when we had kids, and I'm really bad with names, but it's the woman who started 23andMe, her mom, the woman who's the CEO of YouTube, her mom. I forget what her name is. She just passed away. But anyway, she had some really fantastic advice around finances with kids. And she would just say, okay, you need school supplies. Here's your $20 budget. Go to Target and get your stuff. And while I haven't gone that far, I take that idea to heart. So, like, my kids do get a small allowance, they have to do chores for it. But the conversations are always, hey, mom, can I have some money? Hey, I want to go do this. I want to go do that. And I say, okay, here's your account. If you spend this money on this, on going to Starbucks and getting your $5 Frappuccino, like, what is that going to leave you with? And how is it going to affect your happiness as you move forward? Because you might not necessarily have the money that you need to buy the Lego or to buy the thing when we go to the fair that you want to buy. We're really trying to be incredibly transparent about money. My older son, like I said, is going to a ski academy this year. And we tell him exactly how much it costs. And then when he's like, I need a downhill bike because I really need to go off this jump and I need to go do this. And we're like, hey, listen, look at how much this tuition costs. Do you think that it makes sense for us to pay that and also do this other thing? And, it always makes him think twice about, oh, okay, I get it. One of the things that author had recommended when, in the book was when you're paying for college or when you're paying for tuition, have the kids write the checks, like actually write out the checks. And I always think about that. I always think, okay, when we pay for something, like they should see that. I mean, no one writes checks anymore, but they should
be a part of the process.
Be a part of the process, because I think that really brings value to the person who's seeing that. If the money is just there in an account, you're kind of like, okay, yeah, it's there. Woo-hoo. But if you see the actual physical act of how it gets in or how it goes out, it has inherently more value.
Incredible. And so, Jen, as we look to the future and look at what it is that you are creating on this planet, I believe that we're all living just so very long these days. And the potential is certainly there for us to be living even longer. But assuming we all here on this call make it to 102, what impact and legacy are you looking to leave on the planet?
I really am hoping to be a role model for not only my kids, but for the people that I surround myself with. I hope that the things that I do, the decisions that I make, are things that are valued to those people and can help them move forward in life, can help them make better decisions, can help them be better stewards of our planet, can help them be better corporate citizens. Corporate citizenship is one of the things I love in my own job and what I like to talk about and have my clients help my clients through. That's definitely a legacy that I would like to leave in corporate America. But outside of that, just, within my own kind of like familial circle, it is really that role model more than anything else.
Yeah, that's beautiful. So, my two favorite and last questions. One is, obviously money is something that we can invest. We do a lot of savings, and it's there to certainly buy businesses with and to continue building foundational aspects, but it's also really fun and enjoyable, and we can do fabulous things with our money. What are some of the ways in which money brings you joy? What do you love to spend it on?
Oh, I love furniture.
I love that. Tell me more.
I love furniture. I love architecture. I love design. I love eye candy, beauty. So yeah, ultimately, I love I would love to spend a pile of money on my dream kitchen. I'm a big, big cook. I love surrounding myself when I cook in beauty. But outside of that, I love experiences. And I think having beautiful spaces and being able to share that with friends is something that is really near and dear to me. But also being able to have experiences that are outside and are not necessarily don't have anything to do with money. Just skiing in the woods and having amazing snow days and being able to have the time to enjoy those snow days is really where it's at.
I love that. And my final question, Jen, the people who listen to this podcast are all incredible humans who are all up to stuff and who also want to support and evangelize the work of the powerful women who get to be on the show. What is it that you are calling in right now? What do you need that the audience might be able to bring closer to you or help you close the gap on faster? What are your big asks right now?
This is the hardest question of the whole conversation. I never ask for help. And I think that's one of the things that I personally need to work on, because we all need to be able to ask for help and ask for it graciously and with complete candor and confidence. Right now, I'm actually at a little bit of a crux with my career. And I've been an entrepreneur for 24 years and I've never had a job. But recently I've been thinking that I might want one.
Ooh, tell me more.
I I just feel like, what I think would be interesting about having a job and working for a large corporation is that I really want to know how it all works. I want to dig into the whole thing and I want to understand completely the dynamics and the nuance and the drama and the chaos. And I think I just don't want to miss out.
So tell us the job description tell us what kind of job it is that you would want. Give us the picture of what this ideal role can look like.
It's definitely in the strategy world. It's like a global brand strategy director or something in that light that has impact. What I was talking about earlier, like I think that helping organizations be incredible corporate citizens is something that's very important to me. And so using brand to drive that is fundamentally where a lot of the work that I do is. And I think having an organization that is creative enough to say, okay, let's think about things a little bit differently and let's think about how we're going to manage our future and position ourselves for success and longevity outside of where we are right now is what I'd like to find. So I think I do that on a regular basis, but I think embedding into the organization will actually yield a bigger impact and have
I love that.
more, it will actually get something done. But I don't know. And so I guess my question to the audience is, what are your thoughts? Like, do you think it's crazy to think just ditch your very successful business that you've had for 24 years and see what it's like on the other side? I know so many women and so many people are doing the exact opposite. They're leaving corporate America and building businesses like mine. Yeah. And I don't know. I don't know if that's the answer, but I just have I have this thought and this inkling that I think if I was able to really digest all of the dynamics within a larger organization, that I could then turn it on its head and prove to leaders that you can be really great corporate citizens without sacrificing the bottom line. So,
well, Jen, thank you just so very much for your spirit, your time and energy today. I've so enjoyed hearing about your path of navigating wealth, building it, And also just the incredible partnership that you and your husband have to be able to really navigate so many of life's decisions together. So thank you so much for being here.
Thank you so much for having me. I've had a really fun time.
Thank you so much for tuning into this episode of Getting Rich Together. Please take a minute to subscribe. And if you like this episode, I'd love it if you could share it with a friend who is ready to elevate their financial future. Until next time, let's keep getting rich together.